Emerald was never meant to be remembered. His name didn't echo in headlines or flicker on television screens. Yet behind the silence was a man who had given 27 years to truth. A detective who believed evidence mattered more than emotion. When the world cried out for an abductor in the night, Emerald looked inward. His eyes were steady, unshaken by the storm of sympathy that shielded the McCanns. He was ridiculed, removed, silenced, but not broken. His conviction carried the weight of a child's absence, a weight heavier than the smear campaigns that followed. And while others chose comfort in illusion, Emerald chose the torment of truth, knowing it would cost him everything. The first cracks appeared not in shadows, but in the glaring light of contradiction. Emerald noticed how grief should unravel people, how timelines should falter, how memories should conflict under pressure. But with the McCanns and their friends, the story was seamless. Too seamless. In his bones, he felt it. Real life is never flawless. He saw parents who didn't search, who phoned media before police, who held press conferences instead of holding flashlights in the night. The world wanted monsters in the dark. Emerald saw only silence in the living room. Every instinct told him the truth was close. Too close. And that was why no one wanted him to find it. Then came the window, the sacred entry point of the story. The McCanns told the world it was forced, shutters broken, and abductors' calf. British tabloids repeated it without pause. But Emerald, methodical and relentless, stood inside that room and saw something colder. No scratches, no fingerprints, no forced injury. Only Kate's prints, clean and alone. And the shutters, impossible to open from the outside. It was not the window of a kidnapping. It was the window of a lie. He watched as the abduction narrative bent under science and yet was never allowed to break. For Emerald, this was the moment when truth began to whisper louder than the noise of sympathy. Science had already spoken, but now came nature. Two dogs, Eddie and Keela, trained beyond doubt, arrived in Portugal. They didn't read newspapers, didn't fear governments, didn't protect reputations. They only listened to scent. Behind the sofa, in the wardrobe, on Cuddle Cat, on Kate's clothes, in the trunk of a rented car, they barked. They alerted. They pointed without hesitation. The air held the scent of death, undeniable to them, unbearable to those who wanted silence. Emerald stood by as the dogs revealed more than any human testimony. Dogs don't lie, he whispered to himself. People do. But truth without acceptance is like a scream in an empty hall, loud, yet unanswered. Then came the car, the Renault Scenic, rented weeks after Madeline vanished. Emerald's heart sank when the dog stopped at its trunk. Forensic results revealed 15 out of 19 DNA markers. Not enough for a conviction, but too many to ignore. The car should have been ordinary, yet it carried the scent of loss, a ghost bound to its steel. Emerald felt the enormity of what he was uncovering, evidence that pointed not outward to strangers, but inward to those the world refused to doubt. He realized painfully that every discovery was not bringing him closer to justice, but closer to exile, because in this case, truth was never the goal. Protection was.
Portugal in May burns hot, the kind of heat where death cannot be hidden. A body left untouched would speak within hours, its sense impossible to ignore. Yet, nothing was smelled, nothing reported. Emerald's mind drew the only conclusion. Time had been bought. The refrigerator, cold and silent, became a stage where decay was delayed and disappearance prepared. Later, in a fleeting blog post, Jerry McCann admitted he got rid of the fridge, then just as quickly deleted it. Emerald saw more than words. He saw calculation. He saw a family not searching but managing. And he felt the unbearable weight of a truth deliberately kept on ice. Among photographs taken by police, one image haunted Emerald, a blue sports bag in the wardrobe. It was ordinary, forgettable, until it wasn't there anymore. Not listed in inventories, never explained, never seen again. In its absence, it became louder than any confession. Could it have carried a child? Could it have bridged the gap between apartment and car? Emerald believed so, and the silence surrounding it was all the confirmation he needed. For him, the bag was not just fabric. It was a vessel of truth erased from the record, a void that told him more than 1,000 words ever could. Emerald turned his attention to the friends, the top of 7. 7 adults, professionals, all with stories that matched perfectly. Not a slip, not a contradiction, not even a pause. To Emerald, this was not memory. This was rehearsal. He knew how trauma breaks recollections, how real grief stumbles, falters, and collides with doubt. But this group moved like a choir, harmonized into a single version of events. 17 years later, their script still held. For Emerald, their silence was not accidental, it was a pact. And in that pact, he heard a truth too dangerous to speak, too binding to break. A silence that was stronger than justice. On September 7th, 2007, Kate McCann was formally questioned. Emerald prepared 48 simple inquiries, questions that could have cleared shadows or confirmed them. Did you check the patio? Why didn't you search more? What did you see? 48 times, she refused to answer. Not, I don't know, not, I can't remember, just silence. For Emerald, it was the coldest moment of all. A mother who would not speak when words could bring clarity. It wasn't the silence of grief. It was the silence of calculation. Every unanswered question was a locked door, and behind those doors, Emerald believed lay the truth no one wanted unlocked. On September 7, 2007, Emerald was removed from the case. Officially, it was politics. In truth, it was pressure. The day before, a British newspaper had smeared him. Hours later, he was gone. Emerald knew this wasn't chance. It was orchestration. The British government was involved. Gordon Brown had spoken to the Portuguese Prime Minister. Clarence Mitchell worked hand in hand with officials, and the detective who dared follow evidence instead of emotion was erased. For Emerald, it wasn't just personal loss. It was the moment he realized the case had never been about a child. It was about a narrative too powerful to allow him to stay. Stripped from his badge, Emerald picked up a pen. In 2008, he published The Truth of the Lie. On its pages, he laid bare his belief. Madeline died in that apartment. Her parents concealed her death, and the world embraced a staged abduction. The book sold 180,000 copies, was banned in English, and sparked a $1 million lawsuit. The McCanns won an early ruling silencing him for a time, but then Portugal's Supreme Court overturned it. Years later, the European Court of Human Rights stood with him. Twice, his voice was dragged to the gallows. Twice, it survived. For Emerald, it wasn't victory, it was vindication. Looking back, Emerald saw the cruelest irony. The tragedy was not only Madeline's disappearance, it was that her search had been replaced by a war to protect a story. Millions were raised, celebrities rallied, even the Pope gave blessings. But grief, true grief, it does not polish itself. It breaks, it stumbles, it falls apart under weight. This narrative never broke. It grew, strengthened, defended itself with lawyers, government, and campaigns. And so the loudest voice in Madeline's story was never her own. It was the voice of those protecting a version of events too dangerous to lose.
For Emerald, the silence was louder than any scream.